rose bushes. Ribsy disliked the smell of it and was careful to stay on his side of the bushes. Robert was disappointed.
I thought Ribsy might—
No such luck, interrupted Henry, looking at his dog, who had settled himself by the back steps to continue his nap. Henry picked a blade of grass and started to blow through it when the squeak slam of the Grumby screen door made him look up. "Jeepers," he whispered. Stepping carefully over Fluffy, Mr. Hector Grumby walked down the back steps. He was wearing a chef's tall white hat and an immense white apron. "What's cooking?" was written across the hat, and on the apron was printed a recipe for Bar X Ranch barbecue sauce. Mr. Grumby carried a tray full of bowls, jars, bottles, and what appeared to be bunches of dried weeds.
"Is he really going to cook?" whispered Robert.
"Search me," answered Henry. The two boys edged closer to the rose bushes that divided the 2 yards.
"Hello, Mr. Grumby," said Henry.
"Hello there, Henry." Mr. Grumby crossed the lawn and set the tray on the edge of the barbecue pit in the corner of his yard. He peeled a small object which he put into a bowl, sprinkled with salt, and mashed with a little wooden stick. Then he broke off pieces of the dried weeds and mashed them, too. Henry and Robert exchanged puzzled looks.
"Need any help, Mr. Grumby?"
asked Henry. "No, thank you." Mr. Grumby poured a few drops of something into the mixture.
"Is that something that's supposed to be good to eat?"
asked Robert. Mr. Grumby didn't answer.
"What's that stuff in the bowl?" asked Henry.
"Herbs and garlic," answered Mr. Grumby. "Now run along and play, boys. I'm busy." Henry and Robert did not move. "Etta!" called Mr. Grumby to his wife. "I forgot the vinegar."
"I'll go get it for you,"
offered Henry, but his neighbor ignored him. Squeak slam went the screen. Mrs. Grumby stepped over Fluffy and walked across the yard with a bottle in her hand.
"Hector, can't we take your friends out to dinner instead of going to all this trouble?" she asked, as she fanned smoke out of her eyes.
"This is no trouble at all." Mr. Grumby added a few drops of vinegar to the mixture in the bowl. Henry thought Mrs. Grumby looked cross, as she said,
"Hector, why don't you let me cook the meat in the house? It would be so much easier, and then we could bring it outside to eat."
"Now, Etta, I know what I'm doing." Mr. Grumby poured a few drops from another bottle and mashed some more.
"But I don't like to see you spoil the flavor of a perfectly good piece of meat with all that seasoning. It would be different if you really knew how to cook." Mrs. Grumby frowned as she swatted at a bug circling over the sauce. Mr. Grumby frowned even more. "Anyone who can read a recipe can cook." Mrs. Grumby's face turned red as she clapped the bug between her hands and said sharply, "Oh, is that so? What about the time you cut up tulip bulbs in the hamburgers because you thought they were onions?"
"That," said Mr. Grumby even more sharply, "was different." Mrs. Grumby angrily fanned smoke with her apron.
"Just remember when we try to eat this mess you're fixing that it wasn't my idea. Even if the recipe is any good, the meat will probably be burned on the outside and raw inside. Smoke will get in our eyes, and we'll be eaten alive by mosquitoes and—"
Mr. Grumby interrupted. "Etta, we won't argue about it any more. I invited my friends to a barbecue, and we're going to have a barbecue." Henry and Robert were disappointed. They hoped the Grumbys would argue about it a lot more. Then Mr. Grumby looked at the recipe printed on his apron. Because he was looking down at it, the words were upside down for him. "What does it say here?" he asked, pointing to his stomach. Henry and Robert could not help snickering.
"Now, boys, run along and don't bother us. We're busy," said Mrs. Grumby.
"Come on, Robert." Henry turned away from the rose bushes. He felt uncomfortable around Mrs. Grumby because he thought she didn't like him. At least she didn't like Ribsy, and that was the same as not liking Henry. He didn't want to make her any crosser than she was already, although, secretly, he couldn't see why she minded Ribsy's burying a bone in her pansy bed once in a while. Henry tried standing on his hands just to show Mrs. Grumby he wasn't paying any attention to what she was doing. Then he heard someone coming up his driveway. It was his friend Beezus and her little sister Ramona, who lived in the next block on Klickitat Street. Beezus' real name was Beatrice, but Ramona called her Beezus, and so did everyone else.